Welcome to the most exciting workshop you're going to do today. It's called Nurturing a Neighborhood Culture of Engaged Residents. My name is Gina Coleman, and my neighborhood is Haynes Park Neighborhood Association, as well as I'm my first year as a neighbor-to-neighbor board member. So welcome to the most exciting. I call this Community Organizing 101. You get this session and you're going to be good to start a good foundation. And we got two of our most exciting people, neighborhood advocates. And I can't forget, I'm going to introduce Jim and Mike, and then I'm going to introduce Lynn. Lynn is from Vanderbilt, and she's one of our presentation sponsors, and I'm going to let her say a few words before Jim and Mike get started. But I want to introduce Mike Hodge, who started out as Neighbor Resource Center, and that was Mike back in 2004 and 2005 when we were first organizing, and he helped us build confidence and encouraged us and kept us in the middle of the road when we wanted to give up. So thank you, Mike. And I also wanted, and who was the director then of Neighborhood Resource Center. Now he worked with Noah, and then now he's retired, and he can tell you a little bit about that. But I got Jim Hawk, who is our executive director of Neighbor to Neighbor. And Jim has picked up from where Mike left off, and he has pushed us forward and taken us to another level in neighborhood organizing and training and equipping. And so they're going to be our panelists today, and so they're going to be bringing you some exciting concepts to help you get your foundation in neighborhood organizing, and that's the neighbor. We also want to introduce to you Lynn Maddox, who is our presentation sponsor with Vanderbilt University, and we're going to let her say a few words before we get started.
Thank you, Gina. I appreciate it. And thank you all for letting me say a few words about Vanderbilt. Can I stand back here? Can you hear me if I'm back here? Good morning. And yes, Jim, it certainly is early on a Saturday morning, especially one after a turbulent night and a long week of emotional turmoil. I thank you for being here and to embrace and support Nashville's neighborhoods. As Gina said, I'm Lynn Maddox. I'm part of the Government and Community Relations team at Vanderbilt University. And we consider Vanderbilt one of the early Nashville neighborhoods. Vanderbilt has been here since 1873, so most Nashvillians know about Vanderbilt, a private research university offering more than 70 undergraduate majors and a full range of graduate professional degrees with 10 schools and colleges on a beautiful campus with an accredited arboretum. We have athletic programs and facilities and state-of-the-art laboratories with nearly 7,000 undergraduates and 6,200 graduate and professional students. Vanderbilt inspires and nurtures cross-disciplinary research, which fosters discoveries of global impact. Together with the Medical Center, we are the largest private employer in the Middle Tennessee region and generate nearly $12 billion in economic impact for the state. Vanderbilt's chancellors have long guided its growth from a fledgling regional university affiliated with the Methodist Episcopal Church South to the renowned global institution for education, research, and discovery it is today. Our ninth and current chancellor, Daniel Diermeyer, began his tenure during COVID-19 pandemic and joined the long line of Vanderbilt leaders entrusted with navigating steep obstacles. He launched Destination Vanderbilt, a bold commitment to recruit and hire renowned faculty at an accelerated pace. He established the Vanderbilt Project on Unity and American Democracy, which seeks to elevate evidence-based reasoning in a national discourse. He embarked on the university's Vandy United, a $300 million campaign dedicated to Vanderbilt student athletes, the athletic programs, and Commodore vans, the largest undertaking of its kind in the university's history. Perhaps some of you may have experienced the construction and the closed roads. What started with 75 acres and a few buildings 150 years ago has been transformed into a world-class educational research institution. Founders Bishop McTeer and Commodore Cornelius Vanderbilt would be amazed if they could come back today to see their project, conceived only 8 years after the end of the American Civil War, of building a university in the South that would contribute to the strengthening of the ties which should exist between all sections of our common country. Today, 150 years later, students from across the globe come to Nashville, Tennessee to bring out the best in humanity, to push new ideas into the frontiers of discovery, to challenge the limits of what's possible, and to work diligently in the service of others. From arts to music, to science, to nursing, to divinity, to education, engineering, medicine, law, and business, Vanderbilt students go on to be leaders in their fields to achieve historic success in Nashville and across the globe. Nashville is known as Music City. It is also known as the Athens of the South for our historic commitment to arts and education, and Vanderbilt has been at the center of that commitment for the last 150 years. Vanderbilt is proud to call this Athens of the South, this Music City, this Nashville home. The partnership between Vanderbilt and Nashville is one of the strongest city-university combinations in the world, and Vanderbilt is vital to Nashville's success. Last weekend, the university kicked off a year-long sesquicentennial, it's hard to say 3 times in a row, or 150th anniversary of Vanderbilt's founding. During the year, we look forward to providing many opportunities for the community to gather, reflect, and advance our Dare to Grow motto, whether through learning about history, through philanthropy, or finding new ways to radically collaborate. We look forward to seeing you on campus. Please join us. Walk the grounds, come to a class, cheer on the Commodores at a football, basketball, or baseball game, listen to a Blair musical performance, or drive up one of the highest peaks in Middle Tennessee at Vanderbilt Dyer Observatory and gaze through the historic telescope at the stars. We are honored to be your neighbor. And now I'm pleased to join you as we will now learn how to nurture neighborhood culture and engaged residents with Mike and Jim. Thank you very much.
So we're now going to yield the floor to Jim and Mike. Also, we're going to do some housekeeping chores at the end. We want to make sure that you fill out an evaluation sheet. So we're going to help you be my timekeeper. We're going to wrap up at 10 to 10. But right now, Jim and Mike.
Jim says I have to introduce myself so you don't get confused about which one of us is which. Is it okay?
You need to wait for the video.
I do? Okay. I'm not as good at microphones as Mark is. I'm Mike Hodge. I'm pleased to be here with you. I first learned about neighborhood organizing when I worked for the United Methodist Church as a church and community worker. And I started learning that, and then I started working with neighborhood organizations to try to help residents come together to make progress in their own communities. And I must have liked it because I did it for 17 years. After that, I did a couple of things for 1 or 2 years, and then I went to work for the Neighborhoods Resource Center, now called Neighbor to Neighbor. And I stayed there another 17 years. Then about 8 years ago, I went to NOAA, Nashville Organized for Action and Hope, as the organizing director. And I just retired from that. And I really recommend retirement. Okay? It's a good thing. One of the things I really hope you get out of today is thinking about what the job of a neighborhood organization is. Sometimes people say, oh, the job of the neighborhood group is to improve the neighborhood. It's to do cleanups. It's to do this. It's to do that. Actually, the job of a neighborhood organization is to connect with your neighbors, period, and to help them figure out what they can do together. Anybody know who Alexis de Tocqueville was? He was a Frenchman who, I figured Mark and Barb would. He was a Frenchman who came to the United States to study American democracy in 1835. He published Democracy in America. It's still one of the biggest textbooks about democracy. Here's what he said. He said, in democratic countries, The knowledge of how to combine is the mother of all other forms of knowledge. Now that's a complex sentence, so let's do it again. In democratic countries, the knowledge of how to combine is the mother of all other forms of knowledge. And on it, all these others depend. So in your neighborhood, the knowledge of how to work together, of how to combine, that's what's critical. Figuring it out, listening to I know that's a radical thought. Listening to each other, okay? One other quote I wanted to leave before I hand it over to Jim. There's an organizer back in the 60s, Nicholas von Hoffman, who became a journalist. One thing he said is in any neighborhood, only 2% of the people have the time, the interest, and the ability to organize. Only 2%. He said, so don't worry, find the 2% and you run the neighborhood. Okay, so that's what I want you to start doing, is to start thinking about who are my 2%. And if you can get up to 5% or 50%, that's great. But don't be discouraged if you only got 2%. Okay.
All right, Mike, I'll just do this one. I'm plugged in all day, folks. Again, it's great to see you all. My name is Jim Hawk, and Mike and I have a similar story. In fact, when I started at the Neighborhood Resource Center back then, I interviewed with Mike, and we found out that we both grew up as Methodists and were highly involved, and that we both went to Scarron College, and we just realized that our lives intersected in so many different ways. I came to Neighbor, which was Neighborhoods Resource Center 10 years ago, and was really excited because I'm not really a direct service type guy. The handing out of food or whatever it is not me. And I love working with groups and watching groups come together and finding their vision and then going out and figuring out how to meet that vision. That's exciting for me. Interestingly enough, when I applied at Neighborhoods Resource Center, I did not get the job. Thanks, Mike. But they came back and they said, you know, and it's true, Jackie Sims got the job. And I don't know if you know Jackie, but Jackie is an incredible organizer, and I was wet behind the ears. I didn't know enough about that stuff. We got this possible job for you we'd like you to work on. And so I did that for about 2 years, and then they said, well, Jim, you can be the next executive director. I was like, oh boy. And let me tell you, going around the neighborhoods across the city is an amazing thing to do, and to meet the people that are there, right? One of the things I want to talk about today as we're going through this is about culture, and specifically about our neighborhood culture. That to me is critical. I discovered a couple years ago with our own board of directors that we were just sort of going around and doing our usual stuff, and we never took time to examine the culture of our board. And when we did, we realized some pretty scary stuff was going on that we hadn't known about before. And we said, okay, this is not who we want to be. This is not how we want to operate. And so we came at it with intention to say we are going to change our culture and become something different. And while I want to say all the people who have been on the board over these years have been incredible people. I mean, they are gifted people. Paying attention to that culture allowed us to flourish as a board. And today we have really, it's not that we have the best people, but we have the best board that we've had in over 10 years, maybe over 25 years of our existence, because we're paying attention to the culture. And we're making sure that the culture that we are encouraging is the culture that we want to be. And so one of the reasons why we're having this session is really because the engagement is critical. But it's the focus on the culture that we are trying to create in our neighborhoods that is going to be critical to our success. So that's what I'm hoping to get out of that. And we'll be doing some assessment toward the end about the culture in your neighborhood and begin talking about what you would like it to be. Mr. Mike.
All right.
Magic Mike.
All right, you've heard from us. Now you get to hear from each other. We want you to talk at your table and tell each other a couple of things. Each person gets about 2 minutes, okay? No more than that, because otherwise we're going to run out of time. But if each person would take about 2 minutes to talk, say your name, your neighborhood organization, and how did you get involved? How did you get engaged? What made you come to a meeting? What made you start working in your neighborhood? It might have been that somebody invited you. It might have been an issue you were upset about. But whatever it was, tell the other folks what got you engaged. Everybody understand the assignment? Yeah. On your mark, get set, go.
I just graduated college, so I went to Western Kentucky. So I'm in PR in Southern California, which is campaign right now. Is the project manager and assistant to her. So I'm kind of getting involved. That's what I'm not really in my neighborhood because I just moved back. So, but yeah, that's who I am. It's like the Pegram area, so it's possible a little bit. Yeah. No, I'm from Nashville, born and raised. I grew up in Antioch. I went to Lighthouse, and then I moved to Nashville, and I went to 7th grade. I went to Antioch. So from 7th to 12th grade, I was in Antioch, and then I went to West Virginia.
You got about 4 minutes, 4 more minutes. Keep going. Okay, 1 more minute, and then we're done. Okay, that's it. Wrap it up. Save some for next time. Wrap it up. What I'd like to do real quickly is hear what you talked about. We're not going around to every one, but generally, what did this table come up with? What were some of the reasons that you got involved in your group, that you got engaged in what you're doing? Because we're all people, and to make our neighborhood a better place. All right? And connecting, okay. How about you folks? Why did you all get engaged? What happened to engage you?
We got engaged because big business taking over property that residents use and saying it's just empty property. You know, it's a vacant space, so we're gonna take it and put some concrete on it. And so we decided, no, you're not taking it to school, and no, you're not taking this community.
All right, so the issue was what drew them, right?
Yeah, issues.
How about, let's see, who have I not talked to? How about you folks? What were some of the reasons that you got engaged in your neighborhood?
Angry about some things that were going on in the neighborhood.
Angry about, you mean it's okay to be angry? Now wait a minute, we're all Southerners, right? We're supposed to be nice, you know, and be able to say, well, bless your heart. And you know what I mean when I say that, don't you? Okay, so they got angry. Just as a little side note, did you know that the word anger comes from a Norse word, A-N-G-R, it looks almost the same, but it means grief. And if you take that anger and suppress it, it turns into grief. But instead, if you use that anger, not let it flame up, but use that anger to make some difference. You know, okay, people got angry. How about you folks? What got you engaged?
Absolutely. This is a Nashville base table, born and raised table. I'm pretty sure.
All right, the unicorn table right over here. The folks who were actually born and raised in Nashville.
Baptist Hospital and others as well, Nashville raised. So just to see Vanderbilt, see, born here.
Madison.
Here, there we go. So
All right.
we just got activated in seeing the communities change, seeing a need for something to be done to bring light, bring resolution, housing, things changing. We saw a need.
So saw the need and saw the need, and it was an issue, really. The thing that sort of drew you in.
Absolutely.
All right.
I can go on, but that's it.
Okay. Y'all want to add anything to what he did? He got it okay? All right. How about you folks? What really got you engaged in your neighborhood?
Okay, basically it was public safety for one, and most of us wanted to connect with our neighbors. So some of us had like cookouts and block parties, and I live in the southeast neighborhood area, and we actually had a wonderful egg hunt last Saturday with 30,000 eggs.
Whoa.
And about 40 different vendors, and it was, and I believe it was like over 5,000 people that showed up.
That's wonderful. So what drew you to it initially was some of the issues and seeing the way the neighborhood was going. Is that right?
Yes, and like everyone else, right now, it would be Wall Street developers coming in, taking over Nashville.
So it feels like Wall Street developers are coming and taking over Nashville.
Right.
Anybody got something different than what we've already talked about? What drew you and got you engaged in your neighborhood? Yes, sir.
We were talking about the community that is
Uh-huh.
this place, which most people know it as homeless. So what's going on in the community is that he works for an organization within Metro, and I'm a retired Metro officer. And when I used to be the liaison to the minority and the Hispanic community. And what we used to do is we used to go to these homeless camps and try to get them help, because everybody think by going in there it's arrestable. We should take them to jail, and sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes they need help.
But that's what got you involved in your neighborhood group?
Yeah.
All right. What you all have mentioned are critical issues, the way the neighborhoods are going, the way Nashville is going. We could talk about that for a long time. And what I want you to think about now, just as we're ending this part, is what got you personally involved? You talked to me about the issues. That's very good. But why you? Why was it you? You know, no, wait a minute. That's always a good one. Why not? But why was it you? Did somebody invite you to a meeting? You know, did you get upset enough did you get angry enough about something that you called up some neighbors and you came together? You see what I'm saying? I'm wanting you to think about, why did you get involved? All right? And I think I mentioned earlier to some people that I've been doing this work for a long time. 45 years, I think. And I used to think I did it because I believed in justice. And actually I do. So that's part of the reason. But also I got bullied really badly in the 7th grade. And now when I saw neighborhoods getting bullied by the city, when I saw folks getting pushed out of the city because there wasn't enough affordable housing, you know, when you see stuff like that going on, something rings a bell in the back of your head, you know, and you start saying, that's kind of like what happened to me. Even though, you know, 7th grade kid getting bullied, that's not that big a deal, but it shaped my life. So I want you to think some about what got you involved, okay? And how that looked in your neighborhood. Did someone invite you? How did you get really engaged? Just want you to think about that. Okay, Jim, what's next?
Story tell.
Are you gonna tell a story?
Why don't you start and I'll turn off my alarm. Your alarm.
We wanted to be able to tell some stories about ways that Jim and I have seen people get engaged. And one I wanted to tell you about happened in Woodbine. And that is that the Woodbine Community Organization was having several meetings about problems in the community, and a couple of new people showed up. You know, have you had new people show up at your meetings occasionally? All right, well the question is, what do you do afterwards? So after this meeting was adjourning, I went up and talked to them. What a radical thing. I went up and talked to them. and they started getting involved. And one of them's here is Barbara Clinton. You know, and they got involved and they stayed involved because somebody talked to them. I think that was the initial thing, you know? And then they started seeing where they could make a difference themselves. So I think the story I'm trying to tell is talk to people and listen to them. Another story I wanted to tell is how not to do it. When I first started trying to do this work, I thought, okay, everybody likes to eat. Let's have a potluck and invite everybody in the neighborhood to come. So we did that, and people enjoyed eating, and I'd stand up and say, well, let's talk about some of the issues in the community. They didn't want to talk about the issues in the community. They wanted to eat. That's why they came. So you always got to be careful about what you're inviting people to, you know, because that may be the only group you get. I got the folks that love to eat. All right, let's see.
Well, I'll go ahead, and maybe we can just bounce back and forth on stories.
Sure.
So, like the first year that we started offering our neighborhood, Emerging Neighborhood Leaders Academy, we were over at the fire hall still, and some lady came in. She was around 70 years old, and I was on the other end of the hallway, and I saw her come in, and as she was getting closer, I saw she had tears in her eyes. And that was, of course, just really concerning to me. And she came over and I said, pulled her into the office, I said, what's going on? She said, well, I went to my neighborhood meeting the other night, and they told me that I'm the chair of the neighborhood organization now. I have never done anything like this, and I am scared to death, right? And so, you know, fortunately, happy ending, she did get to us. And we went through the training, and at the end of the 6-week training, she told the class, she's like, I can do this now thanks to y'all. You know, and I'm ready. And a year later, she called me up and she said, Jim, I did something. And I'm like, okay, what'd you do? She said, I realized that the mayor had never been to our neighborhood before. And it was time for the mayor to come to our neighborhood. And she said, I called the mayor's office and I said, we want the mayor to come to our neighborhood and speak. And she said, do you know that she came? She came and she talked to us. And she was so proud that that was her moment, that she had come from someone who was terrified to the point of being able to do these amazing things. And so what I get out of that for me that's really important is, first of all, when someone comes to your meeting, don't elect them chair. It's not fair, especially if it's their first meeting. Wait till the second. And then the second is, this isn't rocket science what we're doing here. But it is important that we help people along so that they grow. Provide stepping stones, right? And so a lot of times I hear neighborhood leaders complain to me and say, you know, there's nobody else here to do this. I keep on getting elected president. But this is my 32nd year as president of this neighborhood organization. Okay, that's because we're not giving people stepping stones into leadership. And I love Mike. When we first started, Mike was like, everybody that comes to your neighborhood group gets a job. See, he isn't retired yet. He knows. Everybody gets a job. It may be bringing water, it may be bringing cookies, but it may be greeting, it may be signing people in. Everybody has a job. And that's how we get people to the point of to being chair of the neighborhood group. The other thing is to realize that some people just aren't cut out to be the chair of a neighborhood group, right? So, got a story? Got something else we're doing?
Sure, I got one or two just real quick. Everybody does need a job in your neighborhood group, but all of them are not going to be the leaders that stand up and talk to the mayor or something like that. In the Edge Hill neighborhood, a number of years ago, there was a group that went down to meet with the police chief. I bet we had 10 or 12 people around this conference table in the police chief's office. And a couple of the pastors were talking and engaging the police chief. And Flora Wilson was sitting there not saying a word. She was older, she was retired. She didn't say a word. Then when we got back to the neighborhood, she went up and down her street talking to everybody, telling them what went on. So which of those folks really engaged the residents? Was it Flora Wilson, or was it the ministers that did all the talking? You see what I'm saying? You know, that's the kind of leadership you need to be able to break out and really engage people around. The other thing, since I'm talking about Edgehill, one thing Organized Neighbors of Edgehill did when it restarted in 1990 was to have house meetings so that they listened to one another. So you get somebody to invite over 5 or 6 or 10 people that are on their street, and you have a conversation about what are the things that are hurting you, your neighborhood, your family. What are those things? We didn't want just an intellectual discussion about the growth of Nashville. Well, did you know we have grown by such and such a %? That's not what we wanted. We wanted to know, what is it that hurts you, that needs changing? And people discussed that, and out of each house meeting came 2 or 3 issues. We brought that to a community meeting, and it was kind of interesting. We didn't really send out flyers for this community meeting. We just invited the folks that had been in the house meetings. We had 90 people come to the very first meeting. And they decided on the 3 issues: working with the police, having some kind of relationship with the police, positive or negative, housing, and then education. So those were the 3 big issues that they worked on immediately, because they listened to each other. Listening to people in the neighborhood is what gets folks engaged. Oops, not falling over wires.
And I'll share one more, Mike,
Yeah,
while you're
please.
looking at your list. You know, when we talk about the 4 roles of neighborhood organizing and the neighborhood organizations, we talk about social networking, we talk about service, talk about education, we talk about advocacy. What we have found over the years is most of the people who are in leadership position are advocates. That means they're willing to get down and talk to their council member, they're willing to get down in the planning department and do all that work. The reality is most of the people in your neighborhood are there and will always be there because they want to get to know their neighbors. And so you, as an advocate, we always got to think about that and realize that advocacy is important. But if we don't build those trust relationships, it'll never work. So 12 South started years ago. And the lady that was doing it, she came up and she realized that she didn't know her neighbors. So she started offering coffee and cookies on Sunday afternoon, once a month, for her neighbors. And she got all these people involved. And that was her thing. And then some of them said to her, you know, I bet you we should have a block party. I think we could do that. And she was like, no. But she got everybody involved in that and said, okay, let's learn how to do this. And they pulled this block party together, and they really had a big party. Because it wasn't just their block anymore. Everybody on the other streets heard about it, and so they came, and they filled the street, and it started a year after year party in 12 South. And that organization became very strong. But it was, the focus was on the relationship, it was on the social connectivity. And when they had a crisis, the people who were connected were able to respond more quickly when that crisis happened, because they trusted the leadership, because they knew the leadership from those parties, from the cookie time, and then also from the block parties.
Okay, last story I'll tell. You talked about why you got engaged in your neighborhood. You came to one meeting. Why'd you come back? Why'd you come back to the second one? There are a lot of folks I've said, that I've talked to that say, well, I don't really want to go to those neighborhood meetings because they're talking about the same thing every month. And it just goes on and on and on, and it's just, there's nothing happening. People come back to meetings where they feel like something's being accomplished and where time is valued. Okay? Do you start on time? Do you end on time? Does something really valuable get accomplished? And just a suggestion, have an evaluation at the end of every meeting. You know, it doesn't take long, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes at the most. Find out, did this agenda work? Did we get stuck anywhere on our agenda? And if so, why? And what do you feel like we're going forward with? What are our next steps? There are a lot of pieces that could be a part of an evaluation. But so often we get through the meeting and we've worked so hard to get the meeting done, and we go home and we say, "Whew, that's over." But never do we just say, well, how did it really go? Did somebody exercise some new leadership? Is there somebody else we ought to connect with? You know, what's really going on here? So that whole thing about accomplishing something and having a good meeting, if you have a good meeting, that brings people back the second time. Okay, ready for the other one?
Yeah, circle of membership.
I get to talk too much.
I like it that
All right,
way.
I'm an artist. I didn't know if you knew that. I'm an artist, so I have drawn your neighborhood.
That's as tall as it gets, Mike.
Maybe an artist, but I'm not terribly bright about it. Okay, this is your neighborhood. And I want to try to read it to you because I know everybody can. The outer circle is the community. It's the people you're trying to engage. Maybe they haven't come to your events yet. Maybe they haven't come to any meetings. But this is your community. These are the residents, okay? The next circle in is called the crowd. Now these are your people, the folks who you have some touch with. Maybe they're on your email list. Maybe they've come to one meeting, something like that. But they're not heavily engaged. They are supporters, however. The next level in is called, on this one's called the congregation. For our purposes, you could call it contributor. The contributors. This is actually from Rick Warren, the guy that did the Purpose-Driven Life. So that's why congregation is there. But it could be called contributors. And those are the folks that show up and that take action. Those that are willing to donate or do something to make a difference. The next level down is called the committed. And those are the ones who are really taking responsibility and will help organize other people. You know, they're not just in it for themselves and what they're going to get immediately. They see the longer term. They're willing to be committed and help organize others to accomplish those things that are important to them. And then right here is the core group. And this is the group that without these leaders, everything would fall apart. Now, we want to talk about this in just a minute, but what usually happens, who usually does all the work in your neighborhood organization? How big is the core group in your neighborhood organization? All right, they got 5 people. Anybody else? How big is like the core group? 15 that are the core group, that they're really the ones that make it work. Great. Anybody else? How big is your core group? 4, okay. Anybody else? 3, okay. Anybody else?
1.
How many? 8. Who said 1? That's, all right, she's honest. It is very hard. Sometimes we feel like we're the only ones that are working there. I always keep coming back to, I think it's the story of Ezekiel in the Old Testament, where Ezekiel basically runs into a cave and says, God, they're out to get me. Jezebel and the king are trying to kill me. Nobody is still with me. And God says, fool, get up and go. There's 1,000 people out there waiting to help you, you know? So it's like, because he wasn't willing to go look. And so we've got to be willing to go look. Overall, the job of a neighborhood organization is to see how can you take these folks that are low commitment and bring them in 1 level, 2 levels, 3 levels, to the core commitment. Now, do you want to grab somebody whose first meeting it is and make them president? No. Sometimes it works out, right? Okay, I'm not opposed to sometimes it works out. But in terms of, well, I'll tell you a quick story. There was a neighborhood group who had an important issue they wanted to really organize people around. They pulled people together, had really good attendance, best attendance they'd had, but they needed to select a secretary. So they picked one of the brand new people as the secretary, gave her the sign-in sheets, and she went home and never came back. What happened? She had kidnapped the entire organization, basically. So you got to be careful about who you put in a role. The other thing that we just talked about is everybody ought to have some kind of role, even if it's you are the cookie bringer, you know, or you are the person that calls 2 people on your block. There are some organizations, some neighborhoods organized by blocks. You know, well, maybe you could make one person responsible for 4 others, not 40. See the difference? What you want is you want individuals that are connected to a lot of other people. But you don't want to be running an organization with just a couple of people in the core.
Hey, Mike,
Yeah.
I got a question there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. I was just thinking about, you were saying earlier, for example, that the leadership of organizations, these community groups, I was just thinking that you were saying that earlier that the leadership of organizations will often be those advocates, those folks that are really drawn, but the majority of folks will be there to find and potentially find community, and in the process of that, help create further community. And so I'm just wondering about the balance between these levels, because that comment sort of indicates there's a natural balance, like the majority of folks are going to be there maybe to do a type of action, but that action is a little different than the type of action that those committees, those core, those contributor levels might do. And so I was just wondering if you could tease out what sort of the balance of that looks like in the actual event.
Okay, everybody understand what you were asking? I think there's no guaranteed balance that I can see. For me, this is more organic. I mean, it just kind of grows. You know, you get a hold of a couple of people. One thing I do sometimes is if you're talking with somebody and they seem really hot about an issue, don't take it on yourself. You know, don't say, oh, well, in the neighborhood group, we'll help fix that. No. Say, who else do you know? Who are the other people you know that are upset about that particular thing or that want to see that change? Could you get them together? I'll come to a meeting, but you're putting it back on them. Too often in the neighborhood groups, we have people that come to us and say, well, there's this littering problem over on my street. What are you going to do about it? All right? What's a good answer?
What are you going to do?
Yeah. In fact, I'd say it's your street, right? What are you going to do about it? Okay? So this was real helpful to me when I first saw it. The reason I'm saying that is too often we take the people that are disconnected, they're not engaged at all, and automatically we try to move them in here to the core. All right? That could be a real mistake, like the woman that took the sign-in sheet home and didn't come back, you know? But if you can move them into the next level, just one level at a time, unless there's some real reason to do it more, give people a role. Give them something that they can do. Okay? Any thoughts, comments? Yeah, Deborah?
Organized Neighbors of Edgehill is the oldest. Okay.
Organized Neighbors of Edgehill is the oldest organization in Nashville. Since before COVID, we met in person the last Tuesday of the month for a couple of hours. Since COVID, we were meeting on Zoom. So the membership has declined. We decided that since we met monthly, that we would meet quarterly. And now, meeting quarterly, we still don't have the people to show up.
Right.
So my concern is that we don't have a secretary, so I end up doing the minutes, as well as being chairman, and other things that I have to do. So I don't know how to put in people who are interested in being board members and giving them things to do.
Okay. Everybody hear the question?
Yes.
Anybody else felt like that before?
Yes.
Okay. What I would suggest is find some of the other folks that are concerned about that too. In other words, if there are people that have been active in O&E for a while, go talk to them individually and say, how are you feeling about the way things are going? You know, if you're needing to draw new people in, go talk to some of the people that have not yet been involved and hear what questions they have, what the things are important to them. This guy, Rick Warren, that I mentioned a while ago, he said, most people can't hear you until they've first been heard.
That's right.
I thought that was pretty perceptive. Most people can't hear you until they have first been heard. Yeah, excuse me, Deborah, was that at all helpful? Just get a group together. It doesn't have to be the official board. Get people together that want to see something new. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
wondering if people with concerns like that about secretarial stuff, writing the minutes, do you all have management companies that you can push that stuff off on? Because that's what we do.
Well, you must be in an HOA.
We are.
All right, they're not HOAs.
You're in the-
There are some advantages to HOAs. There are also some disadvantages. So I'm going to. Are we all out there?
No.
Okay. All right. There's a thing I wanted to leave with you that talks about these circles some more, and I only made 30 copies. Okay, so I apologize for that. I will share them around, and if somebody doesn't get a copy, I'll email it to you if you'll let me know.
And while Mike's doing that, I'll start off with the next little segment. Just so you know, we realize that this is like an opening statement. And Mike and I have made the commitment that sometime in May, we're going to offer a 3-hour focus on resident engagement. Specifically, and you all will be our guests if you want to be, because we realize that this is a real issue in neighborhoods and that we need to be dealing with that. Some of the things that we want to talk about at that point is one, a new program that we're trying to encourage people to get involved in called Neighborhood Organizing 365, which basically talks about Resident Neighborhood Engagement 365, which talks about different ways to engage residents throughout the whole year. And Mike is also, one of Mike's many gifts is the one-on-one conversations that we need to have with our neighbors and how to do those effectively. And so Mike's going to help us to actually do those and practice doing those as well. And then we got some other fun stuff. I want to do a couple more stories to get us into this last segment. And I'm going to, yeah, Glenn, cover your ears. I'm going to tell a story about our neighborhood. Lynn's new to the neighborhood, but so our neighborhood was years ago, really a blighted neighborhood, and people started moving into the neighborhood and fixing it up. And they are highly, highly invested in that neighborhood. And they have been working, some of them for 30, 40 years on that neighborhood. And what I discovered was that there were people that were there every time. And if they said something that didn't go along with what they believed, they were really hostile to them, right? And really hostile to the point of they would not come back because they were afraid to go to the meetings, right? And so that kind of culture is really toxic to neighborhood groups. And we have to watch out for that. The other thing that we're seeing increasingly are neighborhood organizations that are aging out. And what do I mean by that? Their leadership, their membership is 65 or over. And there's a concern that and I hear the same pattern over and over again. We cannot get younger people to show up. And the reality is younger people will show up. But the culture that you have in your organization needs to radically change. Right? Radically change. So we were over in McFerrin Park doing a neighborhood development plan so that they could tell all of their developers what their expectations are for their neighborhood. If you don't have one, make sure you get one. Because it's not a planning department thing, it's a neighborhood thing. And one of the assignments that I gave to all the residents was, I want you to go and I want you to talk to someone under the age of 18. I want you to ask them, what is it that you like about this neighborhood and what is it that you don't like about this neighborhood? And they came back and the realization was they had no idea what these kids were thinking. And if you don't know that heard, right, that listening, if you don't listen, you aren't able to really change the culture and invite people in. We make a big mistake. The average age of someone joining a neighborhood group, what do you think it is? 35. Some of you are a little bit more depressed than I am. It's 35. There is no reason why kids that are teens should not be involved in your organization.
That's right.
The culture of your organization will have to change. Because the things that the adults want to talk about may not be the things that the kids want to talk about. So there has to be an openness to allow for that conversation to happen and for these kids to be involved. And it is true when they go off to college, they may not participate in a neighborhood group for a while. But when they come back, they will have this, to whatever neighborhood they go to, they will have the skills that you gave them, that you helped them to learn, and they will use them wherever they live. And so we have one guy in our neighborhood, his mother used to drag him to the meetings when he was like 9 or 10 years old. He had to go to those meetings. Well, now he's the board member for that neighborhood organization. So that transformation. So one of the first things, if you're in that aging group, that you need to do is go out and just talk to the kids in your neighborhood. Talk to the people who are the young folks, and just don't go out and say, hey, come to our neighborhood organization, right? Just have a conversation with them. Just learn what they want. And hopefully they will, again, say, well, you know, what do you like about this? Maybe they'll ask you some questions, and then you have an opportunity to share. If they don't ask, well, don't share. But begin having those conversations. And that's really critical. Now, the other thing I wanted to do, and I'm not going to get to the cultural assessment, we'll put that off. The other thing I want to talk about is neighborhood passions. Because that was something that, at the beginning of the COVID, Valerie Oates-Nellis, who is no longer a part of Neighborhood to Neighbor, she and I sat down for the first time in 8 years just to talk about what we've been doing. And one of the things that she and I began to discover was that people that get involved in their neighborhood organization generally have a passion, something that they're passionate about. And then we discovered that there in Nashville are about 8 neighborhood passions. Safety, right? Beautification, planning and development, right? Especially these days. Making government work for your neighbors. That's the people that get on the phone, or they're the Hub 9, they're the Hub 311 experts, right? You got neighborhood preservation. You have caring for your neighborhoods, or caring for your neighbors, or creating community, or, and this is where we really learn. We used to do all of our training for neighborhood leaders. So the people that were really interested in neighborhood organizing, most people are not interested in neighborhood organizing. If you are, you're a unicorn, okay? But those are the 8. And the thing that we do in our neighborhoods so often is we bring people in and we say, okay, we're all concerned about the litter problem. So we're going to have a neighborhood cleanup. And our expectation is that all of our neighbors are going to come in and work together on that. There's a large group of people who are only concerned about safety. They have no interest in that. So when we close ourselves off and say, this is what we're going to be doing, we don't really engage residents. So we've got to think more out of the box and say, okay, find out what they're interested in, what their passion is. And so, you know, these folks may be all beautification people. I don't know. Maybe you are, right? Today you are because I said you are. And you're the people that are passionate about that. I'm bringing you together. I'm connecting you to one another. I'm saying, we have a problem. I know that you're concerned about it. Will you all help us to get there? This table over here is concerned about all the porch piracy. And there are neighbors that are all over the room. And what I want to do as a neighborhood leader is connect them to one another and allow them to think about that. And they might say, well, I know what the problem is, but I don't know what to do. So then we begin connecting them with MNPD. And we begin connecting them with other, maybe we, you know, there's several other groups that we haven't talked to so that they can do the thing. And then over here, they're concerned that our neighborhood character is changing and that we're going to lose all of our history. That's why there's only 2 people at this table, right? And we're like, okay, come together, and what could you do? They may come back and say, I'd like to have a storytelling event where we bring all of our neighbors together and tell stories about the history of our neighborhood. Okay, and so you begin pulling people out, and you begin to have all these tables, and at each table is a different passion. And it takes a lot. This is why you can't think about it as a chair of your neighborhood organization, right? You can't be someone that wants to be in control of everything. You have to be willing to give up your power, your control, so that other people power can rise from within. And so now I'm sitting here, and it's sort of like I'm a 3-ring circus because there's all these circles going on out here, right? And they're doing the work that they need to be doing. That's how your neighborhood becomes amazing, is when you are willing to give up control, willing to give up your power to share it with other people. And you become a resource person, right? And you begin nurturing those people so that they can do their job. Hi, Stacy.
Hello, Jim. Do you have specific tools or exercises to move the group from point A to point B?
Yes, but you all do too.
Yes.
So please talk about that. Stacy's with AARP of Tennessee.
So, as you were talking, and I love the circles, and I love that sheet that was given.
Sorry, we're recording the session, so we want to hear.
I'm sorry. Okay. So I'm Stacy Pennington. I'm the Senior Community Outreach Director for AARP. April 4th, I celebrate 34 years, believe it or not. I have met Jim in this organization, and I'm a huge, huge fan. I love the storytelling because I feel when he shares stories, I connect. And I love the circles. But I was wondering if there was exercises that you do to take a group from point A to point B. And I ask this selfishly because we do a session called Mission, Vision, and Values. We have some of our volunteers, and I see some. Vivian, thank you so much for being here. That takes us through that exercise. And what happens, because like you said, I can't be everywhere for this high caliber folks with excellent expertise that they live their life every day. And so we usually break up the group. They raise their hand where their passion points are, and we have them break out into groups. They organize themselves. They come up with the ideas. They identify the partners that needs to be committed. They develop the plan, and then they come back to the group, and everybody reports out. And then what they do is they've even taken it a step further. They'll sign on to the plan that they created.
That's good.
And so it's more like the leader is, I feel like I'm more like an orchestrator of different groups of what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And so I was curious, is that outdated? Is there something more that we need to be doing to help facilitate and make it greater? Because I love sharing best practices and I love to learn. And just hearing the conversations in here, I've taken notes and taken some pictures, and I have some great ideas.
Thanks, Stacey. Yeah, that's how we modernize our neighborhood groups, because our neighborhood groups have really been places that let's face it, they're meeting-based. And we come together and we hear a report from MNPD, because they always have to go save people's lives, so they leave right after that. And then we have our council member, and then at the very end we have our business meeting, and we try to squeeze 15 different agenda items into 20 minutes, right? So we have to break out of that mold. You know, I don't have any problems with having fewer meetings, as long as we're getting stuff done outside the meetings. And the way you do that is you say, you know, you have a passion about development, so we want you to work with the developers and make sure things are working right and reporting back. That's a great way to get teens involved, right? Because then the teenagers, you might have 5 teenagers that are really concerned about something different from what the rest of the group was. Let them work on that. Maybe they want to have a party, or maybe they want to have a after-school thing that they can create in their own neighborhood. Support them in that work. That's the job of the neighborhood leaders to support. Brenda knows this. She's not doing that all the time. Support them in that work, but let them do it, right? So I think you're right on. We're right where we need to be today. Is in that process of empowering people, and that means we have to show them how to do the work, right? Because that's the other thing. You can't just throw 5 people together and say, do it. You know, we've tried that a couple of years ago with our registration for the conference. That didn't work too good for us. So make sure that you give them the tools they need to succeed. You said 2 minutes? So the 2 minutes? Mike, do you want to wrap up and I'll...
I'm going to get Mike and Jim to wrap up. We also have the evaluation form we're going to get to the table. So as Jim and Mike are wrapping up, I'm going to pass out the evaluation form. If you could just get that back to us, I'll leave them on the table once you complete the evaluation form.
See, you never give the microphone up.
Brenda and I have conversations about that. For me, a wrap-up is just this whole idea of listening to people, really listening to them. And I'll give you a very quick example. There's a group like NOAA in Detroit called Moses. And they were doing voter engagement, voter registration, that kind of thing. And so this one organizer was talking to a bunch of teenagers and saying, you just got to, it's time to sign up. You know, you're over 18, you can register to vote. And they said, man, no, we don't care about that voting stuff. You know, what is a problem, though, is these judges. If they pick us up for something, the judges do not treat us right. They don't treat us fair. And the organizer said, you do know judges are elected, right? And they said, really? You know, they thought that if you were a lawyer, you just got to be a better lawyer until you were promoted to judge. You know, so once they figured that out, they said, well, yeah, we want to hold a candidate for them. So it was because the organizer listened to them and didn't just take, you know, I'm not interested in that. So I think for me, the core of engaging people is always listening.
I think Elizabeth had a comment.
Oh, I just want to know if there's anybody from the Sylvan Park Neighborhood Association, because I have a new member who wants to get involved.
All right, Sylvan Park Neighborhood Association, if you're not here now, here's a new member for you. I think Jim can connect you.
All right, I think we did about as much damage, Mike, as we could possibly do to this group. They will leave traumatized for the rest of the day. Man, thank you for sharing your time with us. I hope that you will join us when we announce the other 3-hour workshop, because I really do want to go deeper into this. We're just touching, what do they say, brushing the surface, we're just crossing the surface, right? So let's go deeper here soon. Since Gina's passing those out, any other closing comments or questions? Oh. For Mike or I, please.
Yeah, my name's Gary Lynn. I've lived in the Belmont Hillsborough area for 40 years. And one thing I would like to learn more about for neighborhood organizations is how can they become more politically efficacious to address the really big issues? Now, what's a really big issue? a really big issue is we're losing our representation. They're going to cut our council. And in our neighborhood, a really big issue is corporations have come into our neighborhood, purchased 30 to 50 homes. This happened last year. And then when the interest rates went up, they dumped those homes on the market. They were repurchased, and they're 30 to 40% renovated, but they haven't been worked on in 9 to 12 months. And they've degraded the quality of life in the neighborhood. The way to address those kinds of problems is politically, through the political system. So neighborhood organizations must have the political skills to use the system to address the big issues. It's great to have an efficacious organization where people feel good about going to meetings and addressing things like littering and public service and public safety, but they need to be able to coalesce with other groups and address the really big issues.
So one of the myths of being a nonprofit or a neighborhood organization is that you cannot be political, right? You cannot endorse candidates. You cannot spend most of your time doing political advocacy. But on certain issues, you can come together and advocate for specific public policies and speak to those. So it's not that you can't do it. Now, the challenge that I would raise, the tricky thing is, when we make our decisions as a neighborhood group, majority doesn't win. If you are getting 51% of the votes, there's going to be 49% of the people who are upset with that, and it could destroy your group. So if you're going to do something as a neighborhood organization, you've got to figure out a way to make that threshold higher, a lot higher. And that means that there are some issues that you're going to have to say, we are not of one mind, and so we cannot speak to that issue. Right? And we encourage our neighbors to speak on their own. But there are other issues that, and it's weird how that comes about. There are other issues that all of a sudden you're in the room and you're like, you mean we all agree on this? Those are the issues that you motivate and you activate and get out to.
I just wanted to add quickly, one thing that can be done politically, very easy, is invite candidates to come speak at one of your meetings. But don't just let them be there to give their stump speech.
Yeah.
Present your issues to them and have one key question. I mean, you can have others, but the key question is, will you work with us on these issues if you are elected and meet with us every quarter? You're not endorsing a particular candidate. You're trying to challenge all of the candidates. If you really care about this stuff, if you're elected, will you meet with us every quarter and work on these issues with us?
And the other thing that you can do is you can, we'll keep going on tag, right? The other thing that you can do is, again, we talk about social networking, service, education, right? People don't know how, people are first of all scared, but they don't know how to speak at a public meeting. Or they don't know how to go down to the state senator's office and talk to them, right? Your neighborhood organization should be helping people be able to do that. And I also want to say that this is where neighbor to neighbor comes in. You may not personally have the skills to teach that. If you call us and say, we would like to do that, we come and we do the training. Because that's our job, is to make sure that we can do that. So if you don't have the particular skills, we're there for you. Okay? There was somebody, do we have time?
Well, I'm sure
Yeah.
that a lot of people know this, but the neighborhood representative at any metro meeting, planning commission, it always has more time. If you're the designated representative and the normal speaking time is 5 minutes, you get 10 minutes. If you're speaking on behalf of the neighborhood, you just have to let them know that that's why you're there.
And again, one of the keys to that is, I know Vivian had one comment too, is again, if you're not of one mind with your neighborhood, it's okay in that planning session to say, you know, we're not of one mind. Here's the concerns that were raised, right?
No, I have a question, but I can ask you afterwards.
Okay. We're going to let you go. Thank you very much for being here today.
Yeah, we give